Hey everybody, James with Love My Pups, My British Supply. So now we're on part 3 of a 12-part series, the pregnancy. So we already decided on the study we're going to use. We've got our dog in the right situation to get her pregnant. We did the mating and now hopefully she is pregnant, and now we've got the waiting game. The waiting game to have that beautiful litter of puppies. So how long is it going to be? So there's going to be in part 4, we're going to talk specifically about the actual delivery of puppies. So that's not going to be part of this. This is going to be about how do we know our dog's pregnant? What should we be doing for our dog during the pregnancy? What kind of things can we expect to happen? What kind of signs are there if there's a problem arising, and how do we cope with those things? So that's what this video is about. So the first thing is, let's just talk about the actual process of the pregnancy. So we're back to this graph again. And day 1 was first signs of blood. We bred on approximately day 15, give or take. Progesterone levels, this is progesterone here, that slowly rose, went up a little bit, and then went up rapidly. And progesterone levels stay high right until, well, natural birth or C-section or whatever. And the time between when you AI'd and a dog going into labor is typically 61 days. Now, the actual time, and this is kind of seems weird here, but the actual time for puppies to have a natural whelp is actually 63 days from ovulation. So it's 63 days from ovulation, and actually 65 days from LH surge. LH surge, which we don't measure these days. This is ovulation. The important thing here is to realize, and again, we'll get into this in much greater detail, 61 days is variable, and specifically if you AI'd incorrectly, early or late, it'll make this number seem different, because whelp does not occur 61 days after AI. It's all triggered by actually LH surge. But the point here is, we'll go into this greater detail, but the point here is you've got about 2 months of hanging around waiting for your dog to have puppies. So I've got to find myself something to wipe off the board with. So I've got to go screen. Here we go, right here. Yeah, so what are you going to do in the interim? Well, the first thing is my dog pregnant? How do you know she's pregnant? Well, there are some signs, physiological signs, and behavior signs that will start showing up fairly soon after you do the AI. So we're going to talk about those if I can get this off the board. Golly, I've got to get a new board. This is getting crazy. If I can get an area to work on. Okay, so it's easier to tell if a dog is pregnant to start with than a dog that's never been bred before. And the reason for that is that dogs that have not been through whelping puppies tend to have very small little teats that don't protrude out very much. After they've had a litter, then that changes and those teats never completely shrink back up. So a dog that's a virgin dog, a dog that's never had puppies, what you will see is that the teats start to swell. They get more protrude and stick out more. And that's a great sign that things are on the right track. And you might see that as soon as 10 days to a couple of weeks after the dog has been bred. So that's the first sign, or one of the signs, that you're on the right track. The next one is behavioral changes. A dog may sleep more, it may be more lovey-dovey and want to be with you more, and it may have morning sickness. Now, will you see this every time? No. Will you see it quite a bit? Yes. So, morning sickness, the same thing that humans experience, could be loss of appetite, could be not feeling very good and being a bit mopey, not wanting to get up around, want to be sleeping more, could be some vomiting. Those are all signs that possibly that the dog is pregnant. Now, not to be confused with problems like a uterine infection, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. So what's a definitive way of telling whether your dog is pregnant? Do a pregnancy test. And you've got really a couple of ways of doing that. The first one is to go to your vet. And these things, by the way, to make them reliable, I suggest that you wait till 30 days after AI. You can do it sooner, but it's hard to see things on ultrasound. So the first one is an ultrasound. Ultrasound. Day 30. This is after AI, day 30 after AI. The next one is something you can do yourself, which is a relaxin pregnancy test. Again, day 30. And to do that, you go to My Breeder Supply and you buy our relaxin pregnancy test kits. And you can buy those in either 5 or 10 count quantities. And basically it comes with all the necessary stuff. So you're going to need to draw blood, and it comes with needles and syringes, basically all the stuff that you need. It comes with the cassette. It comes with everything you need to be able to do a pregnancy test. And basically what you do is you draw blood, you have to spin it down, which you can just use a ceiling fan if you don't have a centrifuge, or you can go to your vet. And you basically put a drop, there's instructions, if you got a couple of drops of serum in a window, followed with a buffer solution it comes with, and then you will see this gradually go across this window. Within about 5 minutes, you're going to see 1 or 2 lines show up. The C line means that the test is correct, and the T line means the dog's pregnant. So if you see 2 lines, even if it's very, very faint, you've got a pregnant dog in your hands. And in my experience, these have been very reliable. So that's a simple thing to do, cheap, doesn't tell you how many puppies are on board, but it tells you that your dog is pregnant. This one may tell you how many puppies are on board. At day 30, it can be a bit wishy-washy, and I often see predictions here that are incorrect in terms of the number of puppies, but still. Okay, so the next thing that you can do is at day 45, you can do an x-ray. At day 45 onwards, you can do that. It doesn't harm the puppies, but the bones aren't calcified enough until it gets day 45 before you can see it. And then about that point onwards, you can palpitate. Palpitate, if I spelled that wrong, if I haven't, correct me. Palpitate. So what that means is that you're basically going to feel, so by the time you get to like day 50, you've got some skulls on these things that, depending on the kind of puppy, that may be the size of a walnut. And that's something that potentially you can feel. So what you do to palpitate is you have the dog on all fours with its belly hanging down, and you get your hands both sides of its tummy, and you start feeling around like this, and you feel for a kind of a knot, and that tells you that you've got something going on. And I mean, you can palpitate, don't get too crazy rough with it, but you can get fairly rough with it. But what you're looking for is you're looking to feel a structure there, which is basically the size of, a plum or a walnut, which is their skull, and that's what you're feeling for. So that's another thing you do is palpitate. Okay, so now that we've determined that our dog is pregnant, great. So now you've got to go get all your supplies in place, and that's going to be, I think we'll do that on the next video when we start talking about the whelp, about what supplies you should have on hand in preparation for actually having a litter. But let's talk about what you should be doing with your dog in terms of medications, what you should and shouldn't be doing over the next 2 months. So the first thing is no vaccinations. No vaccinations at all. If your dog is due for its rabies shot, delay it. If it's due for heartworming and those kind of things, delay it. The only thing that I'm going to recommend that you do is, first off, is you should have got all of this done ahead of time before you were going to do amazing. Don't, just the day that you mate, don't start giving shots. Don't do any of this stuff. I wouldn't put any extra medication on board unless you need them. The medications that I would advise that you give is a quality vitamin on a daily basis. We use pet tabs, but there's all kinds of brands out there, and there's nothing magical about pet tabs. But the other thing that I do recommend that you do is that you do give folic acid daily. And it's quite a lot, it's 5 milligrams. What you'll find, this one here, by the way, that came from Amazon. I think it was $12 for 100 capsules. That'll do you the entire pregnancy. 1 a day, 5 milligrams. Seems like quite a lot, because most of the things that you see are for like 800 micrograms, that's 0.8 of a gram. This is 8 times more. 5 milligrams every day, and what that can help do is reduce birth defects, things like left palates. We do that. There is some science behind it. I've read papers about this. That's why we do this. Food. Start getting your dog on a higher protein diet, puppy food. What we do is we use, in fact, this is not a product, this is one of their products, but Life Abundance is a product we actually sell on our website. This is actually dental treats, that's not what I'm talking about, but they've got food that's really great stuff. Life Abundance, we transition from the adult food to the puppy food when they are pregnant. And what you don't want is a skinny dog going into delivery. You'd rather have a dog that was a little bit fat. The problem always is at the back end of this, the last week, dogs tend to lose their appetite. And so, you know, you're struggling with what will she eat? And what I find is that sometimes hand feeding her makes her want to eat food. And then maybe switch to boiled rice and chicken if she refuses food. Try some stuff like that. There's really a great diet and something that's different. So in this last week, I think it's about variation. If the dog, and some dogs will just eat all the way through, no problem at all. But if you've got a picky eater, you may find that you've got a bit of a battle to keep her eating. And remember, if she's really loaded up with puppies, there's not much room for food. There's not much room in her bladder. So frequent bladder pee breaks, and you may split the meals up. And if she's not eating much, I'd leave food in a bowl so that she can have access to food whenever she wants it. Okay, so where are we up to now? So now we're going to start talking about, well, what we're talking about medications. Let's keep on going here. So, fleas. If you have a problem with fleas, this is what we use. Adam's Flea and Tick Spray. It's a topical spread on their back. You can use this even when she's nursing. Just don't spray it on the front where the puppies get to it. But we've used this without any problems at all to knock down fleas if that's a problem. Hopefully you don't have a problem with it, but if you would, I don't think it's a good idea to give them something oral, like Bravecto or something like that. I wouldn't do it. Some of those things actually have warnings on them about pregnancy, but that is safe to use. These are best, we've never had a problem with it. Okay, so probiotics I think are a good thing to give. So I think to give probiotics maybe once a week is not a bad thing to do. Especially if you're having a little bit of problem with loose stool. You might try that first. I used to say don't give any worming medication until the puppies are here, but I'm changing that. And what I've seen articles about, we started doing this, is to Safeguard, which is a really very safe wormer, it's a broad spectrum wormer, is to give them Safeguard about 2 weeks prior to whelp. There's two arguments of thought here. You know, that's a product you give for 3 days in a row. You could do that. I've seen other things that say give them a half dose every day, starting about 10 days prior to whelp. What we're trying to do here is get rid of any worms so they're not passed on to the mum, to the puppies, because mum's milk will pass worms on. If mum's got worms, and just a very low level of infestation is quite possible, is to knock that out completely. So I think that's probably a good idea. But I recommend that you Google that before you take my advice. But I think that it's a good idea to start giving a broad spectrum wormer, you know, a week, 10 days prior to whelp and get mum free of worms completely. As far as other medications, no, we don't give any. We don't give heartwormings, we don't give rabies shots, we don't do any vaccinations, we do none of that stuff while she's pregnant. And while we're just finishing up on medications, I'm just going to bring up some other things here. So these are products that you can buy over the counter that you don't have to have a prescription for, but they are regular antibiotics. So here's one, and this one is called fish doxycycline. That is doxycycline. It's the same thing that you and I use. It's just not, you know, it doesn't have an FDA stamp on it. You can't buy that over the counter, but you can buy it for an aquarium for fish, and it's the same thing. Fish Flex is a cefaxilin. This is a kind of a broad spectrum antibiotic. Again, that one is called Fish Flex. You absolutely can buy that one over. And then the one that I actually use quite a bit is Fish Mox, which is amoxicillin. Amoxicillin is the same thing as Clavamox that you give for puppies. You're going to have to Google the dosages. I'm not going to give you the dosages here. You've got to be careful on this. You know, if you start giving antibiotics, give it for the right reason. Don't just start giving antibiotics for no reason whatsoever. There needs to be a specific thing that you're trying to fix that is not a virus, but is a bacteria. So be careful. Don't just start giving, I don't want to give people advice to start doing this. That's just why I'm kind of a bit reluctant on this. I'm not going to give you dosages because I don't want people to come back and say, oh, you gave us the wrong dosages. Go check, figure out what you've got to give, why you're giving it, what's the right thing to do, and either get your vet involved is probably the best thing to do. But if you know what you're doing, you could certainly do it this way. The other thing about this is it comes in, you know, maybe 500 milligram tablet. And you've got to figure out how to break up a 500 milligram tablet to give the appropriate amount for the weight of the dog or puppy that you're giving it to. So I'm not going to say much more about that. Let's see, I think we've got... Oh, well, while we're here, some people have asked about stains on eyes. And so these are things that my wife said, oh, we'll talk about this briefly. So angel eyes is a treat that you give dogs, and it somehow or other changes the enzymes in their tears to stop it being staining. It's just a little treat. It works pretty well. You know, if you've got a dog that's got a really cream white face, has got these tear stains, it won't get rid of it, but it will make it significantly better. And then the other thing is that she uses this thing as a wipe. So that's more directly on the eye itself. That's called Pro-Eye. Pro-Eye. Okay. Those are not important things for pregnancy. They're just a cosmetic thing. That's all that is. Okay. So we on board with giving the right vitamins. We've talked about giving the right food. We talked a little bit about behavior. Now let's talk about some of the things that, well, let's talk about activity level. What should you do? Should your dog be allowed to run around, play like it normally does? Yeah, certainly for the first 4 weeks. When you start getting towards the back 4 weeks, you want to watch the activity level a little bit. I think the dogs that are on the bed and jump off and on a bed, you probably want to stop that, especially the last couple of weeks, because you definitely could jar something loose. So that's something that I would cut back on that. When we go out for walks, the last week or two, we're on a leash and we're limiting our time outside. We don't want to get a dog hot, especially in the summertime. So we're limiting, don't get too cold, don't get too hot. If you're comfortable, they're probably comfortable. But you know, monitor that activity level so that it fits in with the way they're feeling. If they get really huge with lots of puppies on board, look, you're not going for a long walk. It's just not happening. I mean, don't, you know, she may just want to go outside and pee and poop and come right back in the house. In the summertime, if you've got dogs that are outside, watch out for this. You can get dogs overheated, especially if they get really big and fat and full of puppies. So watch out for that, because our Frenchies, they're in the house the entire time, so that's not really an issue for them. All right. So let's see now. Let's talk about things that can go wrong and what you need to be aware of. Okay. So the first thing would be a continuous discharge after you've AI'd. That might be a vaginal infection or pyometria. And those things can get out of control, especially pyometria. Pyometria is basically pus in the uterus, and there's two versions of it, closed and open. I've done videos on this, so you can look that up more there. But a closed pyometria, then there's nothing leaking out because all encased in the uterus, but the dog can get very sick very quickly. And one of the simple things to do always, if you're worried about your dog's health and you think something's up, take its temperature. When everybody calls me up, I always ask, have you taken the dog's temperature? So a normal temperature for a dog is something around 100.5. That is normal, that's fine. A temperature of 101.5 or higher, that is vet visit time. Don't muck around with this. That's time to go to the vet. Don't skimp on this. If 101.5, something bad is going on, whether it be pyometria or whatever else, definitely time to go get a vet involved and find out what's going on. Get the experts on board with that. If it's pyometria, then typically the treatment for that is to give antibiotics. If it's bad enough, it may require the dog be spayed. Be aware of the fact that a lot of these vets want you to spay your dog anyway, and so they can push you in that direction when really you should have tried some antibiotics first before you went through the radical step of destroying the litter and destroying the dog's ability to have any more puppies. So I hear quite a bit of this, and so you're the one making the decision, but I mean, make it a wise decision. Don't go put your dog into a situation where it really should have been spayed and it now gets in terrible trouble. But do a little bit of research before you decide that a dog actually should be spayed. So pyometria, these things typically show up fairly soon after AI, because what's happened is bacteria has been entered into the uterus as part of the AI process. And that also means that you should be reusing your AI stuff. I mean, if you're using AI rods and catheters, throw them away, glove up, clean yourself, clean the dog's vulva, do all the things to keep your hygiene the best you possibly can. You don't want to introduce bacteria. Okay, so what are common things that you see that get people concerned, but they're probably okay? I think that probably the biggest one that I get phone calls on is mucus discharge. So there's a thing called a mucus plug. what happens is I'm not going to do, I know I'm going to draw it because I do such a crappy job of it. But basically, the cervix, the opening to the cervix, when a dog is pregnant, a mucus jelly-like substance forms over that opening and plugs it up. And it plugs it up so that it reduces or limits the amount of bacteria that can get into the dog's insides. That mucus plug can drop out. And it will drop out. You may miss it. Most of the times you don't even see it, but when you do see it, it'll look like a jelly, snotty substance hanging off her back end. And that is a mucus plug. And if you see that, don't get concerned. You may see that as early as 4 weeks prior to whelp. Typically you see that in the last week, but the mucus plug is nothing to be concerned about. You don't have to do anything to put it back in place. You don't need to go make a visit to the vet, but go take the dog's temperature. If you're not sure what you're looking at here, it's always the same rule. Take the dog's temperature. 100.5, around that number, less, more, a little bit, fine. 101.5 or above, time to go to the vet. So mucus plug, basically. So a mucus plug can also be tinged with a little bit of red. So it's quite common to see some discharges throughout the pregnancy where you see a little bit of red mucusy stuff and you get worried that you've got an abortion going on. But the problem is just the mucus plug and it's nothing else. And what happens is, as you get closer to whelp, this little opening starts to dilate. The cervix opens up and starts to dilate. As it dilates, that mucus plug doesn't adhere to it very much and it falls out, and so you see it on the back end of the dog. So quite common. But look, I mean, if you start seeing things like bloody lumps of stuff on the ground, that is of concern. So what can you do about this? Well, the answer is, if the temperature is 100.5, there's no need to go put any antibiotics or anything on board because we probably don't have an infection. If your dog is behaving normally, then you're probably fine. But I put a dog on bed rest. Anytime I see anything like that going on, I put the dog on bed rest. I crate the dog up for at least 24 hours, if not 48 hours. I limit the dog's movement because you may have a little placental tear and you want that to heal itself. It's like you cutting yourself, and if you leave everything alone, put a Band-Aid over it, it all heals up. In the case of the dog, the best thing to do is bed rest and nothing else other than that. If you see a green discharge, now that is a lot more of a concern. That is a placental separation, and that one really is of a concern. What can you do about it? Well, not a lot, other than the bed rest again. If you see a placental surge, green mucky stuff coming out when we're getting close to whelp, then that is more of concern because you wonder whether or not she's about to go into labor and have puppies early. And we'll talk about that situation here in a moment. All right. Let's see, where are we at now? So the vitamins, morning sickness, blah, 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 pyometria, discharges, activity. Well, that covered everything, I think. Yeah, so let's, so here's something else that could happen. Let's talk about loss of a litter. You think the dog's pregnant, you go and you have an ultrasound done, it confirms that you've got, 3-5 puppies on board, all excited. The vet says, oh, come back in another, 4 weeks and we'll do another ultrasound. You go back, there's no puppies in there. What the hell's going on? She's absorbed them. So she presumably was pregnant, now she's not pregnant. What happened? Well, one of the things that can happen here is a loss of keeping progesterone levels high enough. And if you've got a dog that's got a history of this, then it does make sense to go in and get a progesterone test done at about day 30 and make sure that her progesterone levels are high, like 20 or above. And if they're not, you can then give products that keep the progesterone level up. And so I do see this, and it's not a common thing, but I do see it sometimes where you've got, but I just talked to a vet who breeds against our dogs, and she called me up talking specifically about this, and the vet wanted my advice. I thought that was nice. We had a discussion about what we thought we should do, and the answer was, and this dog was about 6 days out from what happened is, it actually produced something that looked like, kind of a nasty, kind of a bloody clot of stuff that didn't look like a puppy as such, but might have been, part of an abortion. And I said, well, I would go do a progesterone test. And she did, and the progesterone level was 6, which is not far off what the number should be in the 5th day before whelp. But I suggested that she gave some progesterone, and she did that. And then everything kind of quietened down. So you've got to go to a vet for this. You're not doing this yourself. You've got to go to a vet. If you've got a progesterone machine, you can do it yourself as far as diagnosing it. But There are situations where dogs do lose puppies, and some of these things could be prevented by giving progesterone. And to do that, you've got to get some warning signs, specifically had a previous failed litter with absorbed puppies, and then I think it makes sense to adjust progesterone level. Okay, I think that I've really covered most of this stuff now that I can think of. Just going to see if there's anything else here that I didn't show you. The worming medication that we use, that's the worming medication, Safeguard. Huge bottle of it right there. It's about 120 bucks worth. That'll last you a long time. You can buy this in different forms. Fendobendazole is actually the product, but Safeguard is actually a goat wormer, but it's exactly the same thing. We buy that at our local Tractor Supply place. Any other medications on the table that I've got out here? I don't think so. Okay, that's it. So, sit tight. 61 days later, it's whelp time. Next video, and we'll talk specifically about getting prepared for it, whether you're going to have a C-section or a natural whelp, what you should be doing, all the things that you should have on board and have bought and purchased and have in place before this even happens. Nothing like good planning. Thanks for watching. I think I've wasted quite a bit of your time here, but we hope that you liked it, and we hope that you subscribe to us, and we hope that you go to My Breeder Supply to get some products that will help you with this whole process. As always, thanks for watching. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate people who subscribe to me. It helps me, encourage me to do more of these videos. But do remember, disclaimer here, I am not a vet. I'm not a licensed medical professional. I'm purely a person who's been breeding dogs for the last couple of decades. Any information that you got from this video, use at your own risk. There's nothing implied here, and certainly this should not be used as a substitute for advice from your veterinarian or your medical professional. I hope you enjoyed the video. Come back for more of them. Bye.